Hi there, hello, thank you for coming along this morning to listen to me tell you all about a previous business of mine and how I built it up to nearly £2 million a year and started that using social media. And then also I'm going to go through the 10 mistakes that I made that ended up with me losing that company. My name's Kerry Rycroft. I'm really excited that you're here today. I'm also really nervous. This is the first time that I've done a live Google Hangout, so I'm kind of nervous that the technology is going to fail me or that something's going to go ridiculously wrong, but stick with me. If it does, I will fix it, whatever happens. I currently run a social media company. My website is kerryrycroft.co.uk. I spend most of my time helping mainly women, but some men as well, who have a business which they want to grow online. So I help them with their online presence. We look at their social media and different ways that they can build their business. So the quick presentation that I'm going to go through with you today, it should take about 30 minutes. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I did in the past, how I grew the company, how I used social media to set up the company and find my clients. And then, like I said, I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail about the mistakes that I made and the eventual loss of the company. So that's another reason I'm slightly nervous, because talking about failure is never fun. It's never easy to sit here and say, I made these mistakes and they cost me a lot of money and a lot of heartache, and they cost a lot of other people a lot of money and a lot of heartache. There's an awful lot of bad feeling around the failure of my business. It's been 3 years, almost 3 years to the day actually, which is quite spooky. 3 years since it happened. And I'll explain more as we go through about exactly what happened, but it still has an impact on me every day today. And doing this call now is one way that I'm hoping that I can kind of share my experiences with you, be really open and transparent about what happened to me and the mistakes that I made, and then hopefully you guys can learn from that and won't ever make such disastrous mistakes as I did. I know that I'm definitely not going to make these mistakes again. They are at the forefront of my mind all the time, and I know exactly kind of what I did wrong and what I need not to do again. So let's go over onto the slides. I'm hopefully going to share my screen with you now. She says confidently. Share entire screen. Okay, so hopefully now you should be able to see my screen. The business that I built started right back in 2006, so it's a long while ago that it started. And at that time I was working full-time in the City of London, and I had 2 children and was pregnant with my 3rd one. And I was building a business at the side of that I hoped eventually I'd be able to quit my full-time job and move on into my side business. So the first thing that I did was to build this business. I was very active in the industry that the business was in. The business was a knitting magazine, is what it started off as. And I was very active in the online knitting world. It was my hobby. I'd knitted since I was a kid. I'd always made stuff. I'd always been kind of crafty. And I decided that once I found other people like me online, there was a lot of communities being created. I was very active on Yahoo lists, forums, and other places. Facebook and Twitter came a bit later. There was lots of people like me at the time. I was in my 20s. I was working in the city. I was earning good money, and I knitted, and there was nothing embarrassing about that. But most of the magazines and most of the stuff out there was aimed at kind of my gran at the time, or people who were looking for a different thing than I was. So on the forums and the Yahoo lists, there was a large group of people very much like me, and we would all talk about, oh, I really wish that there was a magazine for us. I really wish there was somewhere out there where we could get the kind of patterns that we want and the information that we want, because the magazines out there just really didn't do what we needed them to do. So there was a lot of chat for a while about how this ideal UK knitting magazine needs to be invented. It would be fantastic. It would give us exactly what we wanted. And I was really part of all of that discussion and debate. I was on the forums most days. I would share my knowledge with people. And I kind of became fairly well respected in that small niche for what I was offering and what I was doing. So there was obviously a need there for a product. It was something that was talked about all the time, and lots of people would say, oh, we really need to make a magazine. We really need to do this. And that turned into me making the magazine. I had no magazine experience. I'm not quite sure what gave me the right to suddenly decide that I was the person to fill this need and to make a modern knitting magazine that filled the needs of all the other people like me. But for some reason, I decided that was what I was going to do. So I got everybody involved who was on the forums. I asked people what kind of patterns they would want to see, what information, what technical articles, how often they'd want it printed, how much money they're prepared to pay for it. I did all the research using social media, and I didn't realise I was doing it at the time. It just seemed quite natural for me to be doing this, to asking questions, and I built up an ideal product that everybody wanted and delivered it, put it together. I was still working full time. The first few issues of the magazine were produced quarterly. I raised the money for the print run. I posted them out myself. I sold subscriptions to the people that I knew in the forums. I had a couple of hundred people that subscribed, so when the magazines came back from the printers, I would put them all into envelopes and handwrite the addresses on and stick a label in the top corner and go and post them. And it was quite an exciting way for me to see the need for my product and see that people wanted it, and to see that I could actually do this. So it was quite exciting. It was something that at the time didn't really make me any money at all, and it was a bit of a glorified hobby. Then I was pregnant with my third child, and I took voluntary redundancy from working in the city. And at that point I decided that, whoops, that's the wrong button to press, sorry. So 2006 was when I set up the first magazine. I took voluntary redundancy at the beginning of 2007 and decided that I would concentrate on the magazine and I would try and make it my main source of income. Towards the end of 2007, I was beginning to realise how difficult it was to actually produce a magazine completely on your own when you had no magazine experience. It was a huge thing for me to try and do. So I was currently outsourcing a lot of the work. I was outsourcing the design of the magazine, the printing. I had my mum doing the ad sales because she'd always worked in the advertising sales world, so that seemed quite perfect. But right at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008, I approached somebody who I knew, again from the industry, who knew the magazine and who had worked in magazines. And we set up a company together. She became my business partner. So throughout 2008, the company really, really grew quickly. We decided that we would sell to the newsstand. We would make the magazine monthly rather than quarterly. We launched a new magazine, and we basically set up the agreements with the news trade that the magazines would be sold in WH Smith's and Tesco's and exported to America and Australia. So 2008 was a real period of big growth. Throughout 2009 was exactly the same. My business partner was based in Bristol, so she was a long way away from where I was in Essex. So we had two offices. We split the work between the two offices. She chose to leave at the end of 2009, or towards the end of 2009, I think it was October. She chose to leave, and at that time I chose to carry on with the business. I wasn't ready to leave. We were having financial stresses and difficulties, but I decided that I'd invested so much time and effort into it that I wasn't prepared to leave. Throughout 2010, we carried on with the two offices, even though I wasn't able to manage both of them. I was based in Essex. I had the other office in Bristol. I had a lot of personal issues in my life at the time. I'd had my fourth new baby at the end of 2009, so it was quite a juggly year. We hit some financial difficulties. I hit some negative feedback issues. There was lots of people complaining about various things in the magazine, which I'll go into later. And in 2011, I took some very bad advice and was persuaded that the correct course of action was for me to close down that company and start a new limited company, which I did, and which carried on going for another year before eventually in May 2012, that company went into administration. So setting up the company was amazing. The first couple of years was just such a rush in terms of finding the target audience, building the company, setting up everything, launching the products. The day-to-day running of the company became a problem. I made some fairly huge mistakes, which I don't like admitting to, but people make mistakes, it happens. And eventually ended up with the company failing. So what I'm going to do now is just go through, I've been sitting here for the last week writing notes and trying to come up with the top 10 mistakes that I made that I can tell you about, so that then you guys can make sure that you don't make the same mistakes. the biggest mistake that I think I made was that the business I set up wasn't scalable. It grew far, far too quickly, and it was really organic growth. And it grew really quickly from just being me, doing this as a hobby, to being a full-time company where I had 20 full-time members of staff, tons of different magazines, sold through subscriptions, sold individually, sold at trade fairs, and exported to different countries. But our processes didn't grow. So the biggest mistake I made was that we didn't have the right processes in place. Our back office was pretty much non-existent. So in terms of things like HR processes for taking on new advertisers, credit control, staffing issues, nothing. We just kind of swung it all the time, which was one of the very biggest mistakes. Not having the organised back office in place, not having procedures and processes set up, was one of the biggest things that I did wrong. So in any business that I run again, one of the first things that I make sure that I do is to set up the right processes. And as the company grows, you just need to be sitting down once a month and saying, looking back at your processes and saying, is this the right way to do this? Does this make sense? Do we understand what happens when I take on a new starter or hire a VA or launch a new product? You know, document what you do, and then every time you do it again, you can go back to your document and say, well, I've changed that. You know, it can be a living document. A process doesn't have to be something that you create once and never do anything else with, but you have to have the organisation and the processes in place. The other mistake I made was trying to do everything on my own, and this is a real kind of constant theme in my life. I'm not very good at asking for help. I've got this ridiculous idea that I should be able to do everything. So I had no management team. So for the last 3 years of running the business, it was just me managing the entire company. I didn't have an accounts director. I didn't have a HR director. I had an office manager, but I didn't have anybody else that I could turn to for support or to help or to ask questions or to say, you know, we're launching new products next month. Is this the right way to go about it? And there was also no one to challenge me. I wasn't part of a mastermind. I didn't have a group of people who were there to say, that's a great idea, but have you considered this? I didn't have a business coach. I was out there on my own. And that is probably the most frightening and vulnerable position that you can be in. Running my business now, I have a business coach. I have a group of mastermind buddies who I'm on WhatsApp with. I've got lots of people that I can ask for help, lots of people that I can go to and say, I want to do this in my business. Do you think that's the right thing to do? Or people who I can say, you know, help me with this. How do I go about doing this? How have you done that in the past? And that's a huge thing. You need support. Running a business of any size, whether you're running a small hobby-based business or a large £1 million a year business, you need support. You need people to help you, and you need people to challenge you. It's strange to go from a corporate environment where you have a boss and you have a structure to suddenly being on your own and there's nobody to challenge you, and you will make mistakes. Hopefully not quite as many as I did with this, but everybody makes mistakes, but you need a team of people who are there and who have got your back. Too many products. This was another huge one. When we decided to set the company up and go onto the newsstand, we really became aware very quickly that in the terms of economies of scale, if we wanted to get really good deals with printers, if we wanted to get really good deals with distribution companies, with Tesco's to get shelf space, and even with hiring staff, we needed more than one magazine. More than one magazine wasn't going to give us the correct economies of scale. It wasn't going to give us good deals with the printers. In terms of employing people to design the pages in the magazine, one person to design one magazine, they weren't busy enough. There wasn't enough for them to do. We needed more products. But we diversified too quickly. We got too carried away with, there's a gap in the market for a sewing magazine, there's a gap in the market for a beauty magazine. We got too carried away and we created too many products too quickly. So the key lesson that I learned there is to stick with what's right and really make it work before you start launching other products. I'm a crazy ideas person. I wake up in the morning with 100 million things running through my head and think, oh my God, I could do this and I could do that. And wouldn't it be brilliant to do this? But actually, sometimes you need to take a step back and just sit down and stick with the main products that you've got. And then when you've got your processes sorted out and you're organized and you know how those products are running and you know how successful they are, then yes, at that point, go through your list of crazy ideas and decide what are going to be the next products that you launch. No proper planning. This is kind of similar to some of the others. We had very organic growth. We grew very quickly. There wasn't a real management team in place. There wasn't, I didn't have a business coach. There wasn't anybody to kind of in the business that had the skills to sit down and properly plan out our next 12 months, our next 18 months, our next 5 years. We knew we had goals, we had targets, we knew what we wanted to achieve, but we didn't plan things out properly and stick to them. So, for instance, there was a magazine that another publisher was publishing that was to do with handmade beauty. And that magazine came up for sale, and nowhere in our plans or goals or targets did we have buy another magazine, but it came up for sale and we were really excited about it, so we bought it. You know, not clever, not the right thing to do. You need to plan, and once you've made your plans, you need to stick to them. Mistake number 5, hiring the wrong people. I really screwed up with my hiring of people. And that came back to bite me in a number of different ways. I hired my friends, I hired my family, I hired people that I liked, I hired people that I knew, I hired people that supported me and that were excited about what I was doing, and that I thought, oh, you know, that'd be great to give them a job. It would be great to give them the opportunity. Okay, that was the wrong thing to do for lots of reasons. I didn't hire the right person for the job. I didn't hire based on skill set. I hired based on whether or not I knew and liked that person. So as the company was running, that may or may not have been a problem. Hiring my family definitely wasn't the best decision I've ever made. There's certain members of my family who I've never had the same relationship with since I hired them. When it comes to the end of the company, when it came to the last couple of months when suddenly I couldn't pay wages and I couldn't pay staff and the company went into administration, there is nothing worse than looking around an office full of your friends and family and having to say to them, I've screwed up. You're not getting paid this month. There's nothing, there's no job for you. There's nothing here. There's no quicker way to lose all of your friends and a good chunk of your family than to do that. By all means, hire your friends and family if they're the right person for the job. And if you have a management structure in place whereby they're not reporting directly into you, you know, how can you tell your mum that she's late for work in the morning or something? It just makes it very, very difficult. The company wasn't organised enough and didn't have the right procedures in place for me to be able to hire people based on the fact that I liked them and have that work. It caused untold problems. Yeah, mistake number 6, I didn't value myself. I really didn't value myself in this business. I was working 80 hours a week. I had 4 children by the end, and a husband and a house and various other things going on. I paid myself £500 a month, sometimes, if there was enough money left over at the end of the month, which I think was probably 1 month in 3. So really, I was paying myself less than £200 a month. And I always said, there's no money to pay me anymore. There's no money to hire anybody to help. There's no money to do this. I needed to find that money. I needed to value myself. It's very, very difficult for other people to value you if you're not valuing yourself. So yeah, paying myself that amount of money a month basically told me that I wasn't worth any more than that, and the work I was doing wasn't quite good enough, which is how I felt most of the time. Pay yourself something decent. Mistake number 7, I was far too nice. This is another thing that kind of is another theme in my life generally. I'm very good at putting everybody else first. I'm not very good at putting myself first, as you just saw with paying myself just a measly amount of money a month. At the time that I was paying myself that measly amount of money a month, we were turning over £1.5 million a year. So there was money there. It was just being spent on the wrong things. I wanted to make everybody else happy. I wanted to make my staff happy. I wanted to make the readers of the magazines happy. I wanted to keep my relationship with the newsstand, with my advertisers, with the bank, with everybody. I wanted everybody to be happy. And that never works. You can't keep everybody happy when you run a business. I put my staff so far before myself that it's untrue. I don't even know if half of them realise quite how much I put them before me. If I'm really honest, I should have probably closed the company down a good chunk of time before it actually ended. And I'd go into the office in the morning, I'd lay awake at night, you know, worrying about money and paying people and worrying about everything. I'd go into the office in the morning and sit there and look around the office and think, how can I close the company down? Because he's getting married next month, and you know, they're trying for a baby and they've got a mortgage, and I'd felt such responsibility for everybody that worked for me that I kept going. I kept trying. I kept thinking it'll be different. I can't let these people down. And really, I let them down far, far more by letting it drag on for as long as I did than if I had not been as bothered about their feelings earlier on. So it's nice to be nice, but at the same time, sometimes you have to make decisions based on fact and make decisions based on logic rather than make decisions based on the fact that, you know, you don't want someone to lose their job halfway through buying a new house. That's actually not my problem. I thought it was my problem. I took it on. I made it my problem, but actually it's not. It's not my problem. Head in the sand. This, for the last 2 years of the magazine company, we had a fair amount of negative feedback from our readers. Again, I'll attribute this to the fact that we were making mistakes in the magazines. Yes, we were. There was people who we were late paying. Yeah, absolutely. We were very late paying people. Some people didn't get paid at all when the company ended. However, because I started the company in a very public way, because I was very active on social media, because I was there at all the trade shows, building the stand, selling the stuff, packing the stand down the next day, people really associated me personally with the company. So we'd get comments on the forums that would say something like, the magazines haven't arrived this month. I bet Kerry has got a box under her desk and just hasn't bothered posting them out yet. Yes, in the beginning, I used to handwrite the envelopes and post them out. Towards the end, when we had 50,000 subscribers, posting out magazines was nothing to do with me. They went straight from the printers. But the perception was, it's Kerry's business. Everything that happens in the business is down to Kerry, which to a certain point, they're right, because I didn't have anybody else to delegate responsibility to. And I ignored all the problems. I had my head so far in the sand that none of them could reach me. I didn't know how to deal with them. I was completely overwhelmed. We had money problems, I had staff problems, I had family problems at home, I had health problems with some of the children. I had so much going on and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I just ignored it all. The phone would be ringing all day in the office with people ringing up asking when they were going to be paid for work that they'd done for the magazine. I didn't know when they were going to be paid because I didn't know when I was going to have the money to pay them. And that's a horrible conversation to have with somebody. And I handled that really badly. And instead of actually having that conversation and saying, we're having serious cash flow problems, I don't know when you're going to get paid, I would just ignore them and I would hope things would go away. And trust me, it doesn't go away and it doesn't get any better. If you have problems with customer service, if you have problems with any part of your business, you cannot afford to ignore it. Don't do what I did, honestly. I ignored everything for so long, and in the end, it massively, massively came back to bite me. Don't ignore problems. Even if you don't know how to deal with them, be honest. Just pick up the phone and say, I'm really sorry. I know that your invoice is due for payment. I don't know how I'm going to pay you. I'm going to pay you. That's the only thing you can do. Deal with problems face on. Be honest, be open, be really, really upfront about it, and deal with it. Take action. Don't just sit there and hope that everything's going to go away. So poor communication, it's kind of touched on in the last one. I really didn't know what to say, really didn't know what to say or what to do during the last few months of the business failing. So I didn't say anything. I didn't have anybody at home that I could talk to about it. I didn't have anybody in the business that I could talk to about it. You know, the last thing you want to do is to go into the office and start saying to your staff, we've got a real problem with cash flow. We're really struggling to pay people. You know, what do you think I should do? There was nobody that I could get, well, there probably was, but at the time it felt like there was nobody that I could get advice from. And so I just said nothing. I didn't keep people up to date. I backed right away from all the forums and left it to my staff to manage the forums, which in retrospect was actually quite cowardly because that wasn't resolving the problem. It was just making it their problem. And although it was less personal for them, as in they weren't being attacked personally, it's still not a nice thing for anybody to have to do, is to, go onto the forums and go onto various groups and see all of this negative stuff and all these problems and questions being asked, because once it starts to roll, once people start to get a momentum with that there's a problem with this company and stuff's not happening, it just escalates, it just gets worse and worse. So communication is huge. If you are having problems, communicate, talk to people, get help, do something about it. And this is invoice factoring. When the limited company closed in May 2011, and I was told that the right thing to do was to create a new limited company and carry on. Firstly, the person that gave me all of the insolvency advice at that time, I later discovered wasn't a licensed insolvency practitioner and had actually been struck off. So I took some very bad advice from the wrong person. One of the things I was advised to do was to sell my invoice debt to a company. So basically this means that when I raised the invoices, we would invoice probably £50,000 a month in advertising. So normally I would raise the invoices, £50,000 a month, send them out, chase people up. 30 days later, nobody would have paid. You have to chase them up. Sometimes it's 60 to 90 days before you get your money back. When you sell it to a factoring company, on the day that you raise the invoices, they give you 80% of the value. So to me, that's a brilliant way to solve cash flow problems. I've raised £50,000 worth of invoices and I've got £40,000 in my bank account that day. Perfect. However, that gave away a huge part of the control of my business. Now, there was part of me that was thinking, I need to give away control, I need to delegate, I need to have people to support me, but this was totally the wrong way to go about it. Because what ended up happening was I didn't fully understand the process. I definitely didn't understand the small print. I did not understand what I was signing up to. And I ended up in a position where my only source of money coming in that I could pay staff with was taken away from me. It got to the point when my relationship with the factoring company deteriorated to ridiculous levels where we spoke such different languages. I'm creative and impetuous and have these ideas and want to take action and want to create and want to do things. And obviously they're a financial company. They're all about, dotting I's, crossing T's, having everything done exactly. We spoke such different languages and there was nobody in the middle that spoke both of our languages. And this was the final nail in the coffin for me. The negative feedback, the stuff that was happening online with customers being unhappy started to filter through to the real world. Some of these unhappy customers were ringing our advertisers saying don't advertise in the magazines because they haven't paid their staff. They were saying to advertisers, don't pay your bill. Don't pay your bill. They're not paying staff. Why should you pay them? And they were phoning the factoring company and saying, Kerry's stealing money, Kerry's dishonest, this company is going under, the industry's not going to support it anymore. And the factoring company eventually came to me and said, you're in trouble. You are in trouble financially and you're in trouble in terms of all the feedback that you're getting from these people. We no longer have the confidence in our relationship and we would like to appoint an administrator to close down the company. And they had that right. I'd given them that right. I'd signed away the rights for somebody else to decide when my company could succeed or be closed down. So giving away control is really, really different from getting help. And that's the mistake that I made. I needed help, but what I didn't need was to sign everything over to these people who, eventually managed to take everything away. So that's the very sad ending to the story. The company went into administration. All of the amazing, wonderful things that we've done kind of really faded into the background. And over the last 3 years, I've spent 3 years really ashamed of my mistakes, really embarrassed about the things I did wrong. I've had huge negative backlash. Personally, I received a death threat over this. I would have people on Twitter and on Facebook and on emails and on the forums daily accusing me of being dishonest, of stealing money, of being a terrible person, of being a bad mum. My 12-year-old at the time had people on Twitter telling her, enjoy your weekend with your mum because she's going to go to prison for what she's done. It was horrific and it completely and utterly destroyed me. 3 years on, they're still there, my little merry band of people who don't like me. I used to check their forums quite regularly to find out what they're saying about me, but I don't anymore because it's not my problem. It's nothing to do with me. I understand that they were really hurt by the mistakes that I made. I do get that, but 3 years on, I don't understand what actions I could take now that would make them happy. So the company failed in May 2012. I'd been suffering from depression for a couple of years anyway, which didn't obviously help. So I went from working 80, 90 hours a week to nothing, to not working at all, having nothing to do, no work to do, nothing at all. I lost my husband, I lost my home, I lost pretty much all my friends, pretty much all of my possessions, and kind of then embarked on the next journey of my life where for the last 3 years have been about recovery. It's been about me making peace with the mistakes that I made. It's been about me standing up and saying, yeah, I did an amazing thing. I grew a company from nothing to 2 million. It had a huge impact on the craft magazine industry. Companies like Future Publishing, who are a big public limited company, made changes to the way they worked based on me and my magazines. And I've really tried to focus on the positive steps that I took and the good things that I did rather than the mistakes that I made. And part of that process is now about me being honest and standing up and saying, this is me, I'm just a person. I was a person with an idea that took off far too quickly. I made tons of mistakes and lost it. I would go as far as to say nobody came out of it worse off than me. I had £80,000 worth of personal debt as a result of it. The children and I had a really, really tough couple of years on our own. We had to get food stamps sometimes to get groceries. I had to get my parents to pay for a lot of things. I've paid off half of that personal debt, but I've still got the other half of it hanging around my neck. So making mistakes in business, it happens. People make mistakes, but I made a snowball of mistakes. And I wanted to share them with you now, just so that you guys could understand where I was coming from, understand a little bit about what I've been through, and make sure that you don't make the same mistakes. So I'm going to try and stop sharing this now. Excellent. Okay, so I hope that was useful to you. I want to be really open and honest and transparent about the stuff that's happened to me. I love what I do now. The company that I have built up over the last year is completely different from the magazine company. I've always said I'll never run another big company again. I'll never let myself get in that position where I could potentially be hurt as much as I was then. But I think it's in my blood. I think building companies, being an entrepreneur, setting things up, having the ideas, it's really, really part of who I am. I love the work that I do now. I've got an amazing group of customers. I've also got an amazing support team that work with me. I've got Amber, my awesome virtual assistant, who helps me, my team of mastermind buddies. I've done everything right this time. And that's the big key for me, is learning from mistakes and learning kind of what you did wrong last time. And also learning for me that I built that company using social media. That's how I built that company. There was nothing. There was just me on forums, meeting people who were my target customer, asking them what they would like to see in a product, and building the product with them and with their feedback in mind, which then grew to be something massive. So if I could get those mistakes fixed, if I hadn't made those mistakes, it would have been an amazing business. So this is my plan now, to carry on building the business that I am working on, to not make any of the same mistakes, to carry on being open and honest and talking to people on social media and answering any questions that anybody's got. You can find me on Facebook or Twitter as Kerry Rycroft. My website, as I said earlier, is kerryrycroft.co.uk. Feel free to come and leave me a comment. Always happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I plan to do calls of this type every Friday. So there'll be an email coming out to everybody on the list saying what next Friday's call is going to be about. Hopefully it won't be quite as personal and traumatic for me to talk about as this one was. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll send out a replay to anybody who was on the list who didn't manage to see this. Thank you.